Okay, so welcome everyone to another webinar, Praise Charts webinar, and today I'm really excited to have Don Chapman with us. I've done many webinars in the last couple of years, but most of the time I'm talking to people where I'm actually getting to know them right on the phone. And so Don, I feel much more relaxed because you and I have a great friendship and have kind of watched each other grow in our, business and ministries and music and arranging and all that over the last many years. And then we have been able to meet together a number of times and go have some good food and long walks and whatever we do in a city that we choose. Hey, so that's been good.
Yep. Well, let me just say, people out there don't know all that goes into praise charts and how amazing it is, and I call Ryan the Steve Jobs of worship music because it is just this huge, complex, amazing internet futuristic company that is just tackling the worship world and taking it by storm, and it's just exciting to see what you're doing and be a part of it.
Okay, that wasn't actually in the script, so I don't know where that came from. But thank you for that. I actually watched the Steve or the Jobs movie, which is came out in the theaters a few months ago, and I was very, very inspired by him. I'm not sure if I so relate to his spiritual quests, but certainly on a creative, innovative kind of level, I'm very inspired by him, and I'm a true Mac enthusiast, even though, no offense to any of those of you who love Windows, because Don is definitely not a Mac enthusiast. Are you, Don?
Not at all.
Okay. Okay, well, let's just say we won't go into that battle in this webinar. But I can tell you this, that I think it's about 33% of the people that log into Praise Charts are Mac users. So that's kind of an interesting statistic. It's
it's growing a lot. I can see the stats on my website.
Yeah. Okay, so anyways, Don, you've got some really great things that you want to take us through today, and you have been sharing your music with us at Praise Charts from your site, which is, you have a number of sites, hymncharts.com and Worship Ideas and other ones that have been really, really well used. And so it's been great to have your music in Praise Charts. And it's kind of interesting that you and I do quite similar things. We just tackle different, worlds of music. How would you say Praise Charts and hymn charts kind of relate as far as what you do and why I do? I mean, why is it that we can be such good friends doing similar things together?
Well, we're not insecure. I'm not afraid of you, you're not afraid of me. And the world is big enough for us to both exist, and I do things a little differently than you do. And mine is almost more like an artist website, where I'm doing really my own music, only it appears to be more of just a generic type thing. So there are some subtle differences that make it so we're not really in each other's way, but can complement each other. I promote you every week in my newsletter, and you're promoting my music on your website, so it all just washes out.
Yes. I love that. I love that we can be doing something quite similar, and we don't really get into a competitive mode. We fan each other's flames. I want people, to go to your site and listen to your music and engage with it. And if they come to Praise Charts or Hymn Charts or wherever they go, we really have that heart of just doing what we do, doing it well, and trying to be, trying to work together and cooperatively. And you're probably one of the most significant people that I've come across in my, in many that I've kind of related to, where we've just really developed this kindred spirit and love for what each other is doing. So I'm thrilled about that, and really admire the work that you've done as an artist and musician and arranger. I mean, when Don writes these songs, and then he puts them on praise charts and promotes them to his hymn charts audience and worship ideas world. And the songs go into like the top 10 in top 5 sometimes in praise charts. And none of that is fabricated. It's all just people coming. And it's because the songs are great songs, and you have a great audience as well that loves that music. So a couple of the songs that we'll be talking about today have become very well used in this season. So you wrote those songs just, in the last couple of months?
Well, yeah, let me talk about that a little bit. It might be interesting to people how this all happens. I feel like I've got to basically compete with a big company. I'm basically a guy in my spare bedroom doing all this, writing music, and I want it to be on par as much as possible with a big company. So I have different friends I write with, and I wrote Have You Heard with Aaron Flores. He's a awesome worship leader. He just moved to a church in Victoria, Texas. And John Skaggs is a professional drummer. He's played with Nicole Nordeman and Casting Crowns and Chris White, people like that.
Hey, Don, you're cutting. Can someone help me? Is he just cutting out on me, or it's kind of getting a little choppy? Something was happening there. Am I still there? Something was changing.
Hello.
Oh, that's getting better. Yep. Okay.
Well, if it gets bad, I'll switch to my cell phone. So let me know if it gets bad.
Sorry, Don.
Yeah?
I can't hear you. So we just have.
Okay, let me switch.
Down. Okay. Just hang in there with us, people. We're going to get this fixed. Appreciate that.
I'll try my cell phone too, if that'll.
Oh, that's better. That's better.
I'm sounding better?
Yeah, now it's better. I don't know what you were doing before, but okay. So I'll pick up where I left off. Am I still sounding okay? Yep, as long as you have all the volume down on your computer and everything like that. So, yeah. Okay, go for it. So John and Aaron came over to my house around May, and then we wrote some songs, and we went down to Charleston, South Carolina, and Micah Nichols is the band leader at Seacoast Charleston, and we wrote Have You Heard? And so my first step to getting it out is to create a piano track, and John will do a drum track. I'll go to Nashville, and I have some friends, session singers, who sing on this. One guy was in Truth years ago, and just awesome singers. You get that best vocal, because I don't sing. You wouldn't buy any of my music if I sang it. So they do that, and it's just a plain old piano track and drums. That way, if it's too fast or too slow in the studio, I can re-render a track with my laptop right there in the studio. And then once the vocal is down the way I want it, I'll get a guitarist to play on it. And I just God has brought all of these amazing people in my life, and I have a friend in L.A. who's a session guitarist. He just worked with Demi Lovato and did a track with her, and Avril Lavigne, played on all these people, plays on movie soundtracks, and he's a Christian guy. He used to be in Christian music, but when that all kind of dried up, he moved to L.A. to seek his fame and fortune, and he's got right into the center of what's going on in L.A. So I love working with him because he's right there on the cusp of what's happening in modern music, and he'll give me a lot of tips, and we'll talk about guitar tone and all that kind of stuff. And so where he is where Christian music will be in 6 months to a year and a year and a half. Christian music always seems to be a little bit behind pop music. So right now, what's big are keyboards. Everybody is doing keyboards. When I recorded with him, he said, "Oh, I'm so glad to be playing guitars. I haven't played guitars in 3 months." All he does is synthesizer tracks for people now. And he's this amazing guitarist. But it's just funny how
things ebb and flow, you know. And I have friends who play guitar in different churches, and they're all griping that they're not playing guitars as much, and they're not playing leads, you know, and all this synthesizer and piano is coming back. So, but I'll swing around again. Yeah, and I think like Hillsong's new album is real synthesized too, isn't it? So they're sort of more on the cutting edge trending. So all these church pianists rejoice. Your day is coming back.
Although they probably can't just play in the old church piano way. I mean, there's new ways to play the piano. So, yeah. That's
a whole nother webinar right there, Ryan. I used to play like Dino. Remember Dino Carcinakis?
Yes, I remember him. Yeah.
That's kind of how I learned
playing like Liberace. Yeah.
Right. So
well, Don, I think this is where we want to go. Yeah, I think this is where we want to go today is just learning from all the stuff that you've taken in your experience of, you know, going out to the studios and recording and rubbing shoulders with other professional musicians and figuring out, you know, where the trends are going, the styles, what works, what doesn't. I mean, I'm just eager to hear lots of tips and ideas and things, because I've just always discovered that with you don't just kind of sit in your you know, your studio office kind of thing. You write, and then you go out, you get out there, you're in the studios, you're meeting with people, and you're on the inside of all of it. And so I hope that some of that can rub off as we're talking today. So I know that you've put together a number of points, and why don't we just go into them and you take us through stuff that you've learned from all these musicians that you're playing with through the songwriting process, making the song come alive and arranging it and producing it, all of that. Why don't we go into that?
Well, great. Yeah, let's do that for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll talk about Christmas Eve a little bit, since that's coming up around the corner.
Yes.
Well, part number one, songs today seem to be built on these super simple, hooky phrases with guitars. And when I think you have links where they can download some freebies. And in these freebies, like there's a Have You Heard freebie and a Angels freebie. And in those, you can download click tracks, and I'll be talking about this stuff. And there's one I made, a track where I took everything out except the guitars and drums so that you can hear what the guitars are playing. And I'm speaking here out of experience, because when I worked at a church, it was like we were meeting in a cafeteria of about 150 people, and you have your typical pastor who really doesn't know anything about contemporary music. I'm there, and sometimes it's just me playing keyboard with a bass, you know, and then we would get lucky and somebody would join the church who played drums, you know, so you have drums, keyboard, and bass, and I'm just praying for a guitarist to show up, you know. Well, in staff meetings, the pastor was frustrated with me, and he's like, why doesn't the music at church sound like Hillsong? Well, he doesn't know. You know, I mean, here I am in a little church of 150 people, and he expects it to sound like Hillsong. That's where we are. You know, and I'm sure there are a lot of music directors out there who feel frustrated like this. And I said, well, it doesn't sound like Hillsong because we live in a guitar-driven world, and we ain't got a guitar. You know, so then the guitarist showed up, and all of a sudden everything was fine. So I had my job again. You know, and then there's a friend of mine at a church here in South Carolina, and she's a music director at this church. And these are all contemporary churches, you know, that are starting, and we've been trained classically for the most part, so we don't really understand pop music and how it sounds. But the pastors who are starting these churches want the music that sounds like music that's on the radio. And we're clueless, you know. I grew up playing Bach. I don't know all this stuff. So that's why I'm so fascinated, meeting all these people in L.A., learning about this. But this girl called me and she said, could you come down and help us? Our music just doesn't sound right, and we don't know what is the problem. So I went down there and hung out with them at a rehearsal, and I looked at their set list, and I thought, well, they're probably doing like As the Deer and I Love You, Lord, like songs from 30 years ago, and don't understand why it doesn't sound contemporary. And I looked at their set list, and it was all super current. It was Lincoln Brewster and Hillsong United, and I thought, well, I wonder what the problem is. So we went to rehearsal, and there was the problem. I wrote an article about this somewhere, and it caused a huge uproar, because the problem was there was an older guitar player who was playing Lincoln Brewster and Hillsong United like it was 1982. Meaning he was using guitar effects, he was using reverb and delay and all of this stuff and chorus that was popular when he was a kid in the 80s.
Yeah.
And when you try and play Hillsong and all this stuff with those methods, it doesn't sound right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like a huge light bulb, and I realized, man, we're always in danger of atrophying and petrifying and getting stuck in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking to see what is new, how can I make my music sound current but not far out, just your typical, I think we're in the middle of the road. Pop music is where your typical church music should be. It shouldn't be crazy and wild, but it shouldn't be real dated sounding. We're in that sweet spot of just good pop music that the average plumber or doctor or lawyer comes to church, hears stuff on the radio, and then they hear familiar tones in church. And it's all about helping people feel more comfortable and engaged in the music. I'm not doing this just to be cool and hip. I really want to make my music as relevant as possible to reach people, and that's the end goal here.
Yeah.
So
but I do think sometimes it's okay to just talk about the musicality, the style, and it's all part of the greater package of what we're doing. We're not just trying to have churches that sound like the radio, but we are trying to have church on Sunday where we're engaging with our culture and our musical culture, and there are some practicalities that come to that, and I agree. Sometimes you go to a church and they're trying as hard as they can, but something just doesn't sound right. It's probably just like what you were experiencing with that church, and a lot of people just can't hear it. They're like, I know it's not right, but I don't know what it is.
Why?
And often it can be the electric guitar, because the electric guitar is such a noticeable instrument. If it's being played right or if it's being played wrong, it stands out, and it really defines the groove of and the feel and the tone of a song. So you were able to notice.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not saying that flutes and trumpets and strings or anything like that are wrong, because if you think about it, orchestrated music is a huge part of our culture, whether people even realize it or not, because everybody goes to movies. And so a lot of what I want to start doing more of is movie soundtrack type stuff. Like when I do my underscores for my service guides and stuff, I'm trying to sort of get down that road of a movie score type feel, even if it's just on keyboard. But I want to explore more of that in the future and sort of orchestrate. So flutes and trumpets, all that stuff, it's great. It doesn't matter. It's what your church is. If you're in a church where you're blessed with a lot of orchestral instruments, don't throw them out and hire guitar players. That's your DNA. No. Your DNA is to be more orchestrated. I'm just talking specifically now with these churches who are trying to be super close to the cultural sound, but they're baffled and they don't know how to get it.
Yeah. I think it's true that none of these instruments are really going away. The organ didn't go away. It's just there's different ways to play an organ. The guitar is not going away. The trumpet's not going away, but they're are different ways. You know, orchestrations today don't sound like the orchestrations that were in the back of the hymnal, you know, back in 1975. It's a much more, like you're saying, a movie score, or even, you know, I love the whole sense of the rock orchestra, you know, a rock-oriented band, but with a, you know, Mercy Me kind of has that sound to them. And sorry, I've got a phone going off here, but there are lots of bands out there that have that kind of truly, you know, current modern sound, but beautiful strings and trumpets and all of that. It's how they're arranged. That's what we're trying to do in praise charts, really, a lot.
Right.
Make those arrangements available.
Yep.
So that's good stuff. Good stuff. Let's keep going.
Well, back to these songs specifically, Have You Heard and Angels Were Singing, I wrote out a lot of these parts to help people see visually in note form what I'm doing. Like, for instance, with the B3, I wrote out the B3 part. I have no clue how to play B3 organ until I went to Seacoast Church, and Chris Surratt is the campus pastor there here in Greenville. He was a couple years ago, and he's like a terrific rock keyboard player. Had been in bands all of his life. I never played in bands. And he showed me how to play B3, and it's really simple. I mean, you can be as complex as you want, you know, and there are people who are running all over the place, but the core of it is just playing a lot of fourths and fifths and kind of doing little grace notes, and I have all that written out in that handout. And then you have a tone wheel, and that creates the Leslie effect. So you can just sit on that fourth and fifth, and the movement and texture comes with that Leslie kind of gurgling sound you'll hear. And then I have an MP3 with that has that isolated with the acoustic guitar, so you can hear specifically. So, you know, if you have a lot of church pianists are finding new life as church synthesizer players. And I teach classes on that, it's really funny, I'll get, you know, 60, 70-year-old ladies in my classes, and I'm trying to get them excited about playing the synthesizer, because I've been there. You know, in the old days, I ruled the roost in church. I was banging up and down the piano, I was setting tempos, and I don't rule the roost anymore, the drummer does. You know, so it's kind of hard for these 60-year-old ladies to learn how to play in a band. But I just try and help them realize that was fun back in those days, but this is really, really fun. I love playing the synthesizer. I love playing different. It's so much variety. You know, on one song you'll play a B3, on another song you'll play strings, another song you'll play a lead. You know, so, and they're all visually oriented, so that's why I wrote all these parts out, so you can pick apart these arrangements and hear what I'm doing. With Angels, the Angels one, that has a lot of synth going on in the bridge. And there's a thing called a synth lead that you'll hear in that bridge, the Glory to God part, and it comes up through the side channel. I wrote all that stuff out. And you'll never be able to get the exact sounds that I'm getting, because in the studio we're layering sounds with several software synthesizers. What you've got to do is, with your Roland or Yamaha or whatever keyboard you've got, just scroll through all the hundreds of sounds and pick your favorites. You know, pick your favorite strings. Get a fast string, get a slow string, get a string pad, get a good B3 organ that sounds good. And it'll be trial and error. Like, you might hear a B3 organ, you might have 10 B3 organs. You'll find one that you like, but when you play it live in the band, it doesn't work because it's too soft. You know, it'll have to cut through that mix. So you need to get something that might be a little harsher. My friend in LA said everything now has kind of a distorted edge to it. Everything. The vocals have a distortion on them. He said, when you find your B3 sound, make sure it's a distorted B3 sound. So you'll hear that in that MP3. It's not a pure sound. Pure is out. It's got to have some grunge to it, everything. So that would be good for them to see.
I'm just saying it's interesting listening to you because I'm a pianist, and I love, just playing. I love playing just the grand piano. I consider myself just a grand piano player. And a couple of months ago, I had actually auditioned for the worship team at our church, and the worship pastor asked me if I played synth. And I actually was like, well, no, I play piano. Piano is the instrument I really like. But now, even just as I'm listening to you, and I'm wondering how many other piano players out there or organ players, maybe we just need to unlock from how we define ourselves.
Yes.
I play a keyboard instrument, but I have to start identifying myself that maybe I do play synth. Maybe I can engage as an organ or a string player or whatever it is if I want to be relevant and if I want to, be on the team, quote unquote. I got to be flexible and not just be like, I play the grand piano, it's number 2 on that little button on the keyboard, or it's a live piano, and that's it. So maybe there's more of us out there that, and maybe it's any instrument. If it's guitar, do you play electric guitar? Well, do you just have your 2 pedals that you've had for 15 years and that's what you do? Or are we growing with our instrument in the constant new sounds that are able to be made, especially on guitar and piano? Those are the 2 instruments that you have a lot of flexibility in the type of sound. And even the way you play it, like I was just learning, I was in a session with Tom Brooks, and I never actually realized this before, that an organ keys on the keyboard, they're all rounded actually on the corners, and that's so that you can, do that kind of B3 organ slide so that your finger doesn't get all cut up when you got your palm on the keyboard. It's a very common kind of lick. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, but I didn't even realize that organ, the white keys are actually rounded so that you can slide your hand along the keyboard like that. And of course, a lot of our synths that have an organ sound don't have that physicality to the actual keys,
right.
But it's just a limitation that can be overcome. But anyways, I guess all I'm saying is I'm identifying with any of you who are either musicians yourself or you're leading musicians who are kind of locked in to, this is what I play, and I play the piano, not the synth. Hello, people, We're in 2014 now. We can't have that. And, so that's what I'm hearing.
Well, for me, it was a fear. I am a classically trained pianist, and I feel like a complete idiot in front of a synthesizer. And just don't be afraid. It's fun. It is so much fun. Just get in. I am a synthesizer-aholic. I have every synthesizer. I would spend all of my money. Like once in Nashville, I had a little fender bender, and I took the insurance money. Instead of fixing my car, I bought a synthesizer with it. I just love synthesizers, and once you get into it, there's so much you can do. But I'm still, number 1, a piano player. That's my instrument. I think of myself as a piano player, but I'm versatile now. Once I gave myself permission to do it and to fail, you'll fail, but it's okay. Just experiment. Start trying it. Yeah. And once you unlock that, you'll be a monster.
Yeah. What do you think about someone who feels overwhelmed by all the buttons? Because that's how I feel sometimes when I stare at a keyboard that I'm not so familiar with. It's not in my house. It's the church's.
Right.
And I see all these blinking lights, and I'm like, just give me an electric piano or a good string sound. And I don't, so that's just a feeling that I have. Maybe other people have that as well when you're staring at it.
That's a great question. I went recently, a couple months ago, to a church in Columbia and helped them with that one issue. And that is a problem. And hopefully if you can be in on the selection process of a keyboard, make sure you purchase one that is not like the space shuttle's cockpit. some of these keyboards are so complicated that I literally,
yes.
At one church I was playing at, I had never felt more like I was going to have a nervous breakdown. This was 2 years ago. This wasn't 10 years ago. I was playing, and I remember I thought I was going to have a stroke. I was so mad at this keyboard because it made no sense. It's so unintuitive. The only answer is you've got to come in an hour before rehearsal and learn that keyboard. Get the manual.
Yeah.
And what I taught this church was we dug through all the banks, and we found that you could have a user bank that was easy to get to, and so we found all their favorite sounds and saved them to these easy-to-access buttons. And then we put a little Post-it note or something on there so they would know, press this button and then press here, and that's your bank of all your favorite sounds. So it's hard work, some of them. But then some, like Roland, are starting to do, like, here's the piano button, here's the string button. They'll label them. And I like Roland's personally. I think the sounds are warmer and they're a little easier to get around.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad that, even you experience stress sitting in front of the space shuttle, because there's not many other instruments where you have that kind of intimidation like a synthesizer. Right. You're sitting in front of something. I know what the white and black keys do, but I don't know what anything else does. And I'm just saying, there's got to be lots of people, especially how many of us are worship pastors leading others. You might have someone who's 55 or 65, and they're like, this is a new world to them, and they want to play, but somehow we as worship pastors have to help them overcome the intimidation factor. And so maybe that's something we could just speak to a little bit. It's the people that are listening here, we're not all keyboard players, but a lot of us are leaders of keyboard players, and we gotta help them, right? Create a context for confidence. Maybe we need to get in there on the keyboard and help identify, look, these are the 12 sounds that are the go-to sounds for our church, so that you're not dealing with a synthesizer or a string sound that just sounds piercy and it's just, you just kind of want to get that off the table, find your 3 synths, your 3 strings, your couple of electric pianos, and they can be like go-to sounds. So
sure.
Any other suggestions you have? Yeah.
No, I agree. I felt like part of my job as a music director was to do the heavy lifting for volunteers. So I totally agree. In that case, I would go in and learn that keyboard, help them pick the sounds, and learn it so I can help teach them, just so they're not overwhelmed with it. Because you're totally right. I never thought of it. It really is one of the hardest instruments in the band because it's so complicated.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I see Starlene has some Christmas.
Yeah.
Let's get into Christmas Eve now a little bit in our last half hour.
I was just gonna suggest that, so that's good. So Don, I'll just kind of segue into this by saying that you have been, for the last number of years, creating these service packs that are actually complete worship services. They've got a couple of songs and segues, and sometimes they have things that can be said in between and after and before songs, the whole thing. And we haven't typically done that in praise charts, but we've brought yours into praise charts, and they're always so well received because people can be like, oh, finally, there's something where I just know it's going to work. It's been well put together, and they can add their creative flair to a really solid foundation. So you have actually just released the Christmas Eve service pack for 2013. And why don't you talk about how people can get that and what kind of goes into creating these and how people can go into Christmas Eve just feeling that sense of confidence about their night.
What a great setup. It's called Joy. You're a true marketer. Well, here again, you started praise charts the same way I started what I'm doing, out of our own need. I started hymn charts because I found 10 years ago there were no contemporary hymn arrangements. And I was about ready to get fired. You know, people in the congregation were saying, why aren't we doing hymns? Well, you can't do hymns right next to Lincoln Brewster because you can't, nobody can play them. So I started arranging. I arranged All Hail the Power, and that's free at Hymn Charts. You can download my first hymn arrangement in the key of E, and it was a smash hit. My job was saved. You know, same with these Christmas Eve guys. I started them because one time in my life, I felt like I was going to have a nervous breakdown was after Christmas because at a little church, the little church that met in an elementary school grew to 300. We got our own building, and I was part-time, and I do everything. You know how it is, everybody out there working at a church, you do everything. I wrote every note of music. I printed everything. I called, scheduled, everything. So I took on too much. I created a little Christmas program for mid-December, and then around December 19th, I realized, oh no, I've got Christmas Eve. So, you know, I'm working around the clock, and January 1 hits, and I was so burned out. So what these service guides are just encapsulated all of these years of me having a nervous breakdown and what I learned. And I got the idea from those carols and lessons they do in England, those services of carols and lessons, whatever it's called, where they just read a scripture and they do a song and read a scripture and do a song. And so that first one I did a couple of years ago, the Christmas Eve service guide, it had 600 scores, and it has the scripture reading, and then I've created a piano part to segue. So the whole thing is one solid unit of music, and it's just turnkey. You can get this, don't have a nervous breakdown on Christmas Eve, get this thing. I've got the PowerPoint in it. You can play the tracks. Another thing, it's hard to find musicians for Christmas Eve. Everybody's out of town. So you can do the whole thing with tracks, even the narrations, or if you have a capable piano player who's good at sight reading, you can just lead worship and have that pianist there and play everything. Because when I arrange music, I want it at its core to be a solid arrangement. And that means if you're just playing the piano parts, it works. And if you want to have synthesizers and drums and guitars and strings, it sounds great too. But at that core is a stable arrangement. So if all you have is a piano player for Christmas Eve, it'll work. So here I am at this 300-member church. It was a smash. And I'll go through all these things that I learned. Then situations happened where this mega church in town, a friend of mine from Nashville moved down and was the music director, and he said, why don't you come over and help me out? And so I would handle Christmas Eve and Easter. And I did the exact same program that I did in my 300-member church at the mega church, and we had 10,000 people. And I found that very amusing, that it worked. You know, the same exact thing I did there, I just had more bells and whistles at the mega church. Yeah. But it was in the core the same thing. And so here are the 6 principles I'm using. And I'm a real big stickler on Christmas Eve. I think it's one of the most important services of the year because you've got visitors there, and these visitors are nostalgic. They might be lonely, they might be hurting, and they come. I've seen it over and over again. People are coming to Christmas Eve and their lives are changed through this music, and I pray over this service. I put all my effort into it because I want it to be the best thing that is really going to touch people. So that I'm super big into Christmas Eve. All right, number 1. I like to kick off the service with an instrumental piece. And for a couple years we did the it was the Trans-Siberian Orchestra Carol of the Bells. You'll hear it on the radio a lot. you can pull that off real easy with, well, it's not easy to play, but if you just have an electric guitarist and a keyboard and a bass and drums, it can sound good, you know. But but these things are a little harder, and it gives your praise band a chance to sink their teeth into something and learn it and have fun with it and be proud of it. And we did that Trans-Siberian thing at the 300-member church, and I don't know if I've ever done anything in that church that was more talked about. People flipped.
Really?
We had a fantastic electric guitarist, and I had like a string track going just to add a little bit of magic to it. But it just wow. You know, I have a little wow moment every now and then at Christmas Eve. So,
well, you know, another thing I'm thinking is, Don, I was just going to say that it's, other than just having a wow moment, it's nice to start strong. Like just to, instead of, you know, the pastor sort of wandering up on the stage and kind of, well, I guess we're all here and maybe we should, you know, it's just like, boom.
Right.
Start,
yes.
It gives people a chance to find their seat still. If they're still coming in, it's not like you're talking while people are settling in. So I'm really liking this instrumental. People know that they basically have 2 minutes to sit down and engage, and it's a really strong beginning. So that's good.
Yes, people are grabbed. So whenever something works, my mind starts calculating, and I'm thinking, I'd like to try and do that myself. So I created the Christmas Concerto, which is, you got it, praise charts, and then I have the Christmas Fantasia. And you can also see these. This was all done at that mega church, and you at YouTube/worship ideas. You can see me playing these, and I tried to make it very Trans-Siberian Orchestra-like, you know, with electric guitars and sort of what you were talking about earlier with that pop orchestra thing going on. We would hire, because we were in a mega church, there was a budget, so we were able to hire a couple of live string players. That adds to the excitement because people see those bows going up and down. I only would hire violinists. I would never hire cellos. But we had people in the church who played cello. But if I'm going to put my money into something, I want those bows to be seen moving, you know? I learned that from Ralph Carmichael.
That's good.
Remember Ralph Carmichael?
Yeah.
He was a famous arranger. He did that Young Messiah tour years ago, and I worked for him getting music together. And he would just tell all these stories and say, I'm going to put money into those violins. I want to see those violin bows moving. I thought, that makes sense because it adds energy. People are excited seeing that. So check out those two, Christmas Fantasia. It was organ. There's a production department at the mega church, and we went to a big organ with pipes on it, and they filmed me playing it. Then they would sync that video of me playing the pipe organ to me playing live in the church during Christmas Eve. So, you know, I'd be playing live, and then they would see up on the screens me at this big Phantom of the Opera type organ. It was just so cool. So I start playing the organ, and then the band comes in, and it's probably the only time you ever hear electric guitars with organ.
Okay, man, we got to press on. We got 6 points here, so let's go to number 2. And I got lots of people who want to ask you questions, and we have 15 minutes. So let's motor and get to it all. Okay, go for it.
This should be a 3-hour webinar, Ryan. Next one we'll make it 3 hours, okay? I can just blab all day. All right, number 2, kids choir. Now, anybody who knows me, I'm not like the most kid-friendly person. I don't have kids. My friends laugh at me. But I recognize the fact that people love kids. So I'm going to have kids singing on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And there they are. Aren't they adorable? They really were cute. So we had a little kids choir, and I wrote a song with a worship leader, and they sang it. And but this new Joy of Service guide is sort of, the template of everything I'm talking about here. I've got a kid's song in this Joy thing, and you don't have to have a whole kids choir. When I was in the little 300-member church, there was a little girl who was a super talented singer. She was like 7, and she would get up and sing a little kid's song, and everybody would just melt, and it was so cute. And we've got to get kids singing in church. I'm not, like I just read an article a couple of weeks ago about a man who's saying, don't have a lot of kids in your services on Christmas Eve because men aren't, into all that. We got to make our services more manly. Well, true, but I mean, you don't have to turn the whole service over to kids, but give them a chance to participate. We'd have the kids singing with carols. We'd have a carol sing, and they'd be up there singing, and then they would have their special number, and it just was awesome. And you're getting kids involved in church and taking ownership in church. And I don't know about you, but I grew up singing in little choirs in church, and it gives you experience. It's your first taste of actually being in that format. So number 3, Christmas music mix of carols and special music. Always have a little carol sing with 2 or 3 Christmas carols that everybody knows, kind of get people warmed up, and then have some special Christmas songs like "A Mary Did You Know" and all that kind of stuff, or "Angels Were Singing," the song I wrote. Something that's new but has a Christmas theme, so that people can participate, but yet they can also sit there and be blessed and hear something.
Yep.
Number 4, candles. And both the mega church and the little 300-member church, we would have those little candles with a little holder, and we'd put them under everybody's seat, and then we would have a time where we'd sing Silent Night at the end of the service, and everybody would light the candle, and you'd be sitting there, everybody holding a candle, singing it, and then the last verse I would make it a cappella, and that's just a moment to remember, an epic moment that people love. I always want to have ebb and flow.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's almost like that. I don't know if there are very many churches or anyone who would argue with the fact that, there's something about Christmas Eve, lighting candles, singing "Oh Holy Night" or "Silent Night." There's something, it's almost like archetypal. It's an experience that mankind kind of, you settle into that night, and it's just something for humanity, to experience together. And whether you are from a rock church or a traditional church, somehow that experience levels the whole playing field, especially when you get rid of all the instruments. It's just unifying in some kind of way. I don't know what it is about that, but Christmas Eve, that last song and the candles is an experience, and it's a spiritual experience. It's a family, moment experience, emotional. There's so many things that kind of come together for that. So yeah, I agree. It's really good.
And don't get me going on churches that won't do Christmas music at Christmas. I've been writing articles about this, but a lot of these rock contemporary churches think they're too cool and hip to do Christmas music. And a friend of mine plays at one here in town, and just the other night he was telling me how upset he was that he had spent all this time as a guitarist learning their contemporary version of "Hark the Herald Angels," and last Sunday in church they were ready to sing it, and the worship leader freaked out. He thought it wasn't cool enough or something, and they cut it right at the last minute. And I said, well, didn't you do any Christmas music last week? Nope. We are in the middle of December, people. Do Christmas music. People want to hear Christmas music.
Yeah.
You can satisfy your coolness.
There's no question that there is rich, deep theology in some of those Christmas songs. You look at a song like "Joy to the World," it's packed full of richness that sometimes the song becomes so familiar that we don't realize, and there's other verses to it that many of us never sing. that, really flesh out the gospel message. So there's a lot of that in a lot of the carols. They've just become so familiar, and that's the opportunity for us every Christmas to come in and bring some of these songs that are recognizable and bring the message of them, right? So that's good.
Yep. And by the way, all these pictures that they're showing, this was at the mega church at the last Christmas service we did 2 years ago. So 2 more points I'll just go through quickly. Number 5, use Scripture, the Scripture Christmas story to form your whole service. Just find that passage in Luke, chop it up into different sections, have a narrator read each one, have that lead into a Christmas song. And there again, that's what I'm doing with my Christmassy service guides. I've got Scripture there, flows right into a song. Worship flow is all about connection, getting a smooth flow between songs and transitions without any dead space. And then the last one is add a wow factor. And at one of these pictures, like in this one, you can see some snow up at the top, and then there's another picture somewhere in there where you can see the snow falling down. I had been down to Disney World and walked down Main Street during Christmas, and they have snow falling on Main Street, and it is so unbelievable. It's beautiful. And so I come back to church, and I said, man, that was so cool. And the worship leader goes, well, let's do it. Why not? Let's try it. So they rented snow blowers and put them up in the rafters. And then during the last song, that picture, during the last song, in the middle of it, it starts snowing. And it's kind of this soapy texture. It dissolves. And people just were mind-boggled by it. It looks beautiful. It looks like something out of a TV special. But, we couldn't do that in the 300-member church. That was too much for our little church to do. So there's other things we did. The way our auditorium was, it was folding chairs, so you could arrange them. We rented a grand piano. We could afford that, a couple $100. Rented a baby grand piano. We put it in the middle of the room and then had the chairs all around me and the musicians.
Yeah.
So, and then we had some special lighting. So it was very inexpensive and easy to do relatively, to change things. So when people came in, something's different. It looks different. And it was every bit as amazing. So just trying to figure some little wow factor thing that you can do to make it special. So that's my points, and we can go into any questions.
Well, I have to tell you, Don, this is kind of a funny story, but one of a memorable Christmas Eve for me was in 1997 up here in British Columbia, and I had put so much work into Christmas Eve, but my head was frazzled, and there were many sort of strands of details that weren't coming together, and the snow started to come on Christmas Eve during the morning, and it just kept coming and coming and coming, and so there was like 4 feet of snow in a parking lot of our church by 4 o'clock, and we canceled Christmas Eve, and I was so relieved. It was like the best Christmas Eve ever. I went home, lit the fire, and I was like, I don't have to endure the stress of this night. And so anyways, it's a very memorable night. But now, just listening to these 6 points of yours, I'm like, man, I think I could actually do this again, because you really nailed it. This is the essence of how we can just come to Christmas Eve, and all the elements are there. It's good for small church, big church, and it's a great opportunity to reach into the community. So thank you for that. So now we've got a few minutes. We are going to go overtime just a little bit, not 3 hours, let me tell you that. So some people have to go. We're recording all of this, and you can play it any other time, but I just want to, take some time to, I've got about, 6 or 8 questions here. I want to say, Don, you're not allowed to talk on each of these questions for 10 minutes, okay? So we're talking, 1 or 2 minutes on each one. We'll get everyone's question addressed, and then and if you have a question you want to bring in, you just put it up into the little box up at the top of your screen. Natasha is taking them, sorting through them, and then she's texting them to me so that I can read them out. So let's start at the beginning here. Greg says, you mentioned the focus on guitar-driven versus keyboard-driven music. With the popularity of shows like The Voice and X Factor and American Idol, how do you feel about vocal development and even vocal-driven music? Are there any vocal styles or trends?
Not that I am aware of, but I do notice that all of these people that I am dealing with are so focused on the tracks that they almost forget about the vocal. The vocal almost seems like an afterthought. So I've commented to them on that, like, gee, your vocal, you really could use some more vocal production on that vocalist. Bring out some more emotion in them. And they're like, oh, yeah. Like, they forget about it. They're so enchanted by the track and the synthesizers that, you know. And a couple of years ago, I had predicted that choirs would make a big comeback because of Glee and stuff like that. You would see some reality shows about choirs, but it didn't take really. So, no, I don't really see any trends for vocals.
Okay. Well, I hope that helps, Greg. Paul says, you said guitarists are having trouble finding work in pop music. Do you think Christian music will change to be more electronic like pop music?
I would normally say yes, but it's getting so far out. Like, I've heard people complaining about the new Hillsong United that it's not playable as much in church because you do have all of this technology that people have to learn. And for years, we basically chased keyboardists out of the church. At this mega church, 10,000 people at Christmas Eve, I was the only person in that church capable enough to accompany and play for choir rehearsals. There were no other keyboard players in a church of 10,000 people who could sight read good enough to play for choir rehearsal. So we've driven away keyboard players. Now that keyboardists are back in vogue, we're not getting them. You know, we're going to have to go out and find them and get them in. But I don't know. I think we'll have touches of synth. We'll have more synthesized. A bigger church. I was at a famous mega church a couple of weeks ago, and they were doing the Hillsong thing. You heard a lot of synths going on in the praise set, and the guitarists were kind of sheepishly standing in the back, not doing much. So you do see it in mega churches, but your regular, typical 300-ish member church, I don't think you're going to see a lot of cultural swings like you would in a church that could pull off something. You need to have a lot of track ability. You got to have click tracks to really get into this synth stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting from the album, the last Hillsong United album, I think it has Zion on it, that song Oceans has been very well and widely received. I was actually just talking to Steve McPherson, who is the publishing director at Hillsong, about that song, and he was just saying how surprised he was at how widely received that song was. And it just kind of seems that even though there are, you know, Hillsong United is a kind of band that's always pushing the envelope and stretching, and yet somehow people are still gravitating to certainly some of those songs and finding ways to incorporate them into their worship experience, and they're working. Like, lives are being transformed as people are singing those songs, and they're not your typical 3-chord, you know, simple harmony type songs anymore. So somehow people are overcoming the limitations of their previous mindset of, you know, how you do music, and because there's something in us that wants to keep moving forward, I guess. So anyways, that's just interesting about that song. A little plug on that is we're actually giving that song away for free out of Worship Leader magazine in January, February. So if you get that Worship Leader magazine, you can look for a little plug from Praise Charts there. Well, let's keep going. JD says, I play sax, tenor, alto, and soprano, do you think these will continue to fit into our changing music flavors?
Well, that is there'll always be churches that do more of an orchestral thing, but styles come and go, and if you are playing a more specialized instrument like that, you're going to be real busy part of your life, and then another part of your life you may not even play. I can remember in the 90s when Kenny G was huge, it seemed like every church had a saxophone player noodling around like a Kenny G thing. I have not seen a sax in a contemporary church in I can't remember how long. So, and the same with an organist. Every church used to have an organist. Now only the big churches that have a cathedral kind of a thing. I have a friend who was the hired organist at the Crystal Cathedral years ago, and then she went on to another church in Indianapolis. They're very specialized. There are very few organ majors anymore. But who knows, maybe in 20 years the organ will be big again. It's just always an ebb and flow in music. So
I think one of the things about those orchestral instruments, if it's trumpet or saxophone, flutes, is that making a way for those instruments takes leadership. Someone has to prepare and have a vision for that. So I don't think the saxophone is a non-relevant instrument. It's just that unless someone is really thoughtfully making a way for it to, you have to have an arrangement, unless you're just kind of a quote-unquote noodling sax player, and those can be nice, but if you're playing in any of the orchestral instruments, you can't just show up and, say, well, I'll just play along, or give me the chart kind of thing.
Right.
Someone's going to be like, what? I don't have just a chart for the trumpet. And so, I'm always a proponent of, I would love to see worship pastors have the vision for a full array of different instruments, and we're trying to provide the resources for that so that they can lead in such a way as creating a platform for those instruments. So I am your proponent.
That is a very complex question too, because in these contemporary churches you have a rock star type worship leader who a lot of times can't even read music. If you're playing sax, you're never going to play in that contemporary church. There are two types of churches out there. One is trying to sound like the radio, and that's the number one goal. Another church wants to be more people being included, and they don't care about the sound of the music as much as they want to have people playing what they can. So a tuba joins, they'll bring that in if a sax plays. So it's not going to sound bad. It's just not going to sound like it's on the radio. So you need to be in a church of that sort where you can play and you're not concerned with how it sounds, or the style of how it sounds, as much as that you're actually involved in playing.
Yeah. Okay, a couple more questions. A couple questions about classical. How can we teach classically trained musicians to play by chords and to improvise? And do you think the main stumbling block for classic pianists is the new rhythmic vocabulary and repetitive figurations, chord progressions like your 1-4-5, 1-4-5, and all that kind of stuff? So mainly, how do we train our classically trained musicians to break out of their former molds?
Well, that literally is a whole nother seminar of groundwork. Like, I'll teach an hour seminar on this where I'm telling them, that was me. I walked into college only playing classical music, not improvising. I learned how to do all this late in life, and it was a huge mental shift that cannot happen overnight. And I remember teaching a class a couple years ago on this. First of all, I'm trying to encourage them to not be afraid. You might be able to play Bach and Beethoven, and you feel helpless when you're in a praise band. That's not a fun feeling. You got to learn how to work through that. I have a bag of tricks, I call it, where I have patterns that I learned. And I walk them through how I shifted from a classically trained pianist to being able to improvise and play by ear. I can play any song in any key, and I couldn't as a freshman. So I learned it, and here's how. But that's a long talk.
It's a long story. I got a quick story on that. I am a classically trained pianist. I went up to grade 9 Royal Conservatory, and so I was at that place by the time I'm 16. I have all this, thousands and thousands of dollars of lessons, and I could not play for the life of me for anyone that wanted to sing while I was playing, or play by ear, play by chords. I just couldn't do any of it, and I really wanted to. So I unplugged from Royal Conservatory, and then I got this piano teacher who was like a jazz pianist. He was really incredible, and I spent 6 months with him. And you want to know what's interesting is many of those piano lessons, I would literally sit on the side of the bench or stand at the bench and just watch him. And I just kind of soaked in the inspiration of, he'd play songs like Amazing Grace and then just totally turn it on its head and, input all these other chords. And it was like it was just feeding into my spirit and internalizing this sort of artistic sense of the music. And that's something that I think when you want to learn to play by ear, you can't just depend on, even if you know the chord is G, there's got to be something that connects with your heart and your spirit. You've got to feel it deeper inside. That's what I believe, anyways. You want to start to develop a kind of style and personalizing how you play piano. That's what I think is a major transition from classical music, where you're playing somebody else's style on a page exactly as it's written, and you're moving to a place where you're just getting hints, chords and maybe little melodies, but you have to then impress your own person into how it's played. And that's a transition that you can't just read from a page. What do you think about that, Don? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you have to have the technical stuff down pat with your fingers so that your brain is freed up to express those emotions you're talking about. That won't happen for months, weeks and months, because as the classical pianist is learning what to play, I'm not looking at anything and I have to pull this out of my head. It's going to sound wooden until that kicks in, and then their emotions can take over.
Yeah, and then probably the most gifted and beautiful players are those that have the classical background, but then have layered on the by ear type of playing, and then you have a very gifted, versatile musician. But there is a transition that you just got to kind of press through. So I very much identify with that, as I hear that you do. A couple more questions. Jim asks, what would you consider the top contemporary guitar effects?
Well, it's funny, but basically this guitar guy in L.A. was laughing about, there's a real popular song out now that sort of has who's made the template of all pop music, and it's literally the guitar plugged into the computer and turned up to distort a little bit. That's it. Super dry with a little distortion. And you'll hear that on the Have You Heard Guitar Spotlight MP3, where it's just bum, 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 a plucking sound. So that's really super popular now. I'm not a guitarist, so I don't know much about effects, but he said dry is good, very little delay, little reverb, a dry, grungy sound is what's popular now.
Good. Gary asks, how do you balance performing at your highest technical level without showing off?
Well, I think of a young kid who's playing at a church I'm at now, who is playing drums and super busy to show off. Every beat has a fill in it. The top drummers, like John Skaggs, this buddy of mine who co-wrote these songs with me, he is the best drummer I have ever heard, and that means he is rock solid and very simple. And so I don't think there's a problem. If you're really good, that means you're really tight and you're on the ball. And then I think it's okay once in a while to have a guitar solo and show off a little bit. You don't want to do that every song, but once in a while, because it's just everything is so black and white in worship music. You'll have a camp of people that say, we're never doing any solos. We're never going to do any guitar solos. Well, okay. But once in a while, do a solo. Have your best female singer get up and lead and sing a new praise song as a special number just to introduce it to the congregation. That's okay. Don't be so black and white. Have a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's good to remember that playing at the highest technical level doesn't always mean you're busy, in your
yeah.
It means that you're very purposeful and tight. And sometimes a highly technical way of playing could be not busy, but just well chosen. And but you're right, Don. Sometimes, and I guess a worship leader is going to have to lead to make a way for this appropriately. There's no shame in taking, whatever, your 12 seconds and just playing appropriately, in a solo section. You're not playing for the honor of yourself. You're expressing your gift, and there's no shame in that if it's done appropriately. And I think you can just play boldly and play with joy and play for Jesus, right? Play unto Him. And just let that be your testimony. So, yeah, I believe in that. There is no shame in that. Okay, we are going to wrap literally here in a couple minutes, and thank you to those of you who are listening. This is it always starts to get really interesting towards the end. That's the challenge of these webinars. So Cliff asks, what software are you using to write your arrangements?
Well, being an oddball PC person, this probably won't be much help to you because every single musician I know is on Mac. And they laugh at me. And I said, well, I am making a living at this. But I'm using Sonar, which is a PC sequencer to create all of my tracks. And then I use Finale to write all the notation. But I have to break down and buy Pro Tools, which I absolutely detest Pro Tools. It is so unintuitive, clunky, but everybody is on Pro Tools. So if you want to interact with other musicians, you just have to be Pro Tools. And I'll give Pro Tools this. I will create files on my PC in Pro Tools, and my buddy in LA can open that same file without any problem, and he mixes it for me. So that's very rare. I've had trouble with somebody from a Mac computer sending me a text file, and it won't open right. So the fact that Pro Tools has made something that is so cross-platform, I'll give them that. But other than that, I hate the program.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to wrap it there and just tell you, Don, this has been really fun. The more I'm talking to you, the more fun it gets. Now I could go for another hour with you because I'm more relaxed and comfortable now. So sometimes it takes me a while to sort of get into the groove. But you know what I like about you, Don? I've always liked this, that you just kind of say it like it is. And sometimes there's people like me that think, I wish I could say that, but I can't because I want to be liked. And you just don't care because you're hugely successful in your little second bedroom, and you just you built a house recently, and you've got things set up really well. And it's not like you're living the big rich life, but you're very content, and you're doing what you love. And, and you're not really living someone else's dream. You're living your dream. You found a way to do it. And it's electrifying just talking to you and being like, just go for it. Just do it. And no one can tell you that you can't do what you're doing or you won't be successful, because you would just laugh at them and be like, well, I am. I'm doing it, and I'm doing it how I believe it. And you're a real inspiration to me in that way. That's why I think we sort of rub off on each other in such a great way, because we have that kind of spirit of, I just want to pursue this dream that God's given me and use the tools that I have and just go for it. And who cares what other people think? Well, I probably care what other people think a little bit more than you, but that only says more about you. I just really like how you are in that way. So thanks, Don, for sharing. Your stuff. You're very, very practical. I mean, when you lay out 6 points about Christmas Eve, those are, as far as I'm concerned, you nailed it. Like, from the candles to the kids and everything in between, that is the essence of Christmas Eve. And if anybody wants to know, they need to just listen to this webinar, I think, and just be like, people can say all they want, but it all is going to boil down to these 6 core things, pretty much. And all your experience in the studio, great stuff. Keep writing. And, other industry artists, they're going to have to watch out for this little Don Chapman in South Carolina, because he's going to write songs and throw them into praise charts. And they're going to be like suddenly, number 5 or number 3. And I think it's, it's kind of fun to be innovative in that way, isn't it? Secretly, you're just like, you're coming from outside the traditional world and doing your thing with genuineness and integrity, and God's blessing you, and I'm thrilled. And so, good stuff.
Well, thanks for the kind words. It really, I have to say, it's all God. I am not smart enough to have figured this out, but He gives you the desires of your heart if you seek Him, and He's blessed me, and I'm very grateful for it, and it's all Him.
Good stuff. Well, some people, I'm sure, weren't able to stay the last 20 minutes, and if any of us have their email addresses, we need to tell them that they missed the best part. As soon as 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time hit, we really started getting rolling. So this will be on YouTube. We will archive it. You can listen again and go through the points. Don has lots of free downloads. All his music is in praise charts, and you can go to hymncharts.com and worship ideas and see other pictures and videos and engage with him. Get on his email list. He's always got great things to say, and he's definitely a friend of praise charts. So thanks to those of you who stuck around. I hope you enjoyed this time of two friends just, chatting it up, talking about what they're passionate about. That's what this is all about. And Merry Christmas to you, Don, and the rest of you listening in. Have a great next couple of weeks, and we will talk to you. We'll have some great webinars planned for the new year. I've got one. I'll tell you one I'm really excited about is the first opportunity I had a few weeks ago to meet Jason Ingram, who is a great songwriter. Do you know about Jason Ingram, Don? Do you know who he is?
Oh, yeah. He's one of the top Christian songwriters.
He totally is. Yeah, most people wouldn't know him much as an artist, but he's written a lot of the songs that you guys sing. He writes with Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman and the Hillsong, Reuben Morgan, lots and lots of co-writing. So anyways, he agreed to do a webinar with me in the new year, so that's going to be great, and others are planned. So stay tuned, but we'll be going strong at Praise Charts right through until Christmas Eve, probably not Christmas Day, but we're putting music into the site right until, because we've got people buying Oh Holy Night on Christmas Eve. So I don't know, what people's planning schedules are like, but hey, we're all good for that. We have it ready. You know, we'll probably have people buying your service guide at 3:00 on Christmas Eve. You know, so I wouldn't put it past them.
Yep.
But it will work.
It'll work.
So I hope you're all encouraged by good resources that we have from all different sources, and especially Don's stuff will be very practical in the next few weeks. So good stuff. Okay, Don, I have to go, and I'm sure you do as well. So thanks for taking this time with us, and I'll look forward to seeing you in person in the new year. We have to hook up again, so that'll be fun.
Great.
Right?
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Okay. Talk to you all later then. Thanks for Natasha's just putting a little note saying we got something at praisecharts.com/Chapman free gift. If you go to that website and you're download some free stuff from Don. So I just want to put a plug in for that. So thanks for making that all available. And Merry Christmas, everyone.